Yeah, for an expert analysis on the ongoing trade tensions between Seoul and Tokyo, we have Dr. Graham Ong-Webb, a research fellow at Singapore's Nanyang Technological University, joining us on the phone today. Hello there.
Hi.
All right, so with the trade restrictions kicking in today, how much of a damage is expected for Korea, considering that Korea is an export-oriented economy that relies heavily on semiconductors and tech goods?
Well, I think it's going to cause considerable damage to the South Korean economy, I'm afraid to say, because of the reason that you just outlined. And this is precisely why Tokyo is implementing this measure, knowing that this is what is going to hurt South Korea right now and the Moon Jae-in administration in light of the ongoing download relations and the disputes that have been going on over the last few weeks. So this is really the culmination of that. And Tokyo is well aware how this is going to be a pain point for Seoul. So I think, if that's been the goal, I think the goal is being achieved. And I think Tokyo has sort of, in a way, scored a point. But I think many critics and observers have jumped in the right way, saying that this is not going to just hurt Seoul and South Korea in general, but it's also going to hurt the Japanese economy, and it will have knock-on effects in what is a very highly integrated global economy today. I mean, we're talking about a web of regional and global supply chains which make economies across the Asia-Pacific, in the least, highly dependent on each other, and this is going to hurt everyone. And I think this will show up in the economic performance indicators over the next quarter.
All right, now observers have been saying that Tokyo's trade restrictions do indeed go against WTO principles. So if Korea takes the case to the WTO, how do you expect the process to go?
Well, I'm not quite sure. We have some precedents here. As you know, from my reading of what's happened, I mean, if you dig in and see what's been enunciated by Tokyo, there is this allusion to a national security concern, particularly with the targeted materials on the table and the implications of dual use, particularly in biological and chemical weapons. And once this was articulated, it became very clear that what Tokyo is seeking to do is to use that same national security argument that the Trump administration has used on steel and aluminum tariffs, which is an ongoing issue, and what Russia has been using against Ukraine in their dispute, and what Saudi Arabia and Bahrain have been using on Qatar. So what we're seeing here is what the WTO itself has feared for some time, which is the use of this loophole, if you like, in the WTO body of regulations that empowers states to use the national security card and the grounds for valid grounds, if you like, for implementing these trade restrictions or these tariffs. And so the WTO has gotten into a very sticky, very messy place where it says it's not in a position to arbitrate or to mediate between these kinds of disputes, because that's what the WTO is not designed for, fundamentally speaking. But this is where we're at right now. So it remains to be seen whether the Moon administration is able to pull off an argument through the WTO against the Tokyo decision. But because this is an unprecedented, development in the scheme of things. So I think it remains to be seen what will happen.
All right. So then, how can Korea fight off the negative impact of the restrictions? I mean, in what ways can South Korea turn the crisis into possibly an opportunity?
Well, this is a bit of a stretch, and I made a very similar argument in the case in other interviews or discussions about the bans on Chinese tech companies by the U.S. administration, particularly Huawei, which has been in the hot seat over the last few months until the recent decision by the Trump administration to go back in some of those restrictions. And that is, I think this is an opportunity for all the big players in the tech space, including South Korea, to start moving away from this dependence on the comparative advantages of other tech players like Japan or China or the US for that matter, to start investing a lot more in research and development, to build your own independent capabilities and your own, inherent advantages. In this case, in producing high-end dynamic random access memory chips and other kinds of chips that are integral to the building of smart devices today, which South Korea is a huge player. So I think this is the best time as any to start moving away from that dependence, because what we're seeing right now are countries being held hostage by these trade restrictions when they are implemented, and it does cripple their business operations and their ability to generate revenue. So I think the R&D investments have to be made now in order to have those greater independence in the near future. It's going to take a hit, I think, on all companies having to spend more on R&D, but I think it's a critical decision to make here and now, because I think this national security card is going to be used again and again by states. So this tit-for-tat behavior we're seeing on the global stage is going to become the new normal, in my opinion.
All right, now, like you mentioned a little bit before, but what do you make of this growing trend of tariff threats and export restrictions in the global economy? I mean, could we see the Korea-Japan case as another trade war?
I think so. I think it's fair to say that this is what we're seeing. We're seeing the rise of new tech wars, trade wars, if you like, writ large, but beneath that, in particular, are these tech disputes. And this is what's happening between Tokyo and Seoul right now, very similar to the tech wars that we're seeing between Washington and Beijing, because the tech space is the space for the greatest amount of growth, the greatest amount of opportunity. Right, we're talking about the digital revolution, Industry 4.0, and all the new things that are to come in that space, all the disruptive technologies and the rise of smart cities. And this is precisely why I think Tokyo has decided to make this decision, knowing where it can hurt a country the most when an economic instrument like this is being used. So this is the new normal in my argument, and I think all states playing in the space have to be prepared and have to build those capacities not to be held hostage in the future. Because right now what we're seeing is if Tokyo carries this through and if Seoul isn't able to get some amount of reprieve or recourse through the WTO, is that the South Korean economy is going to get hit by this decision by Tokyo. And so to prevent that in the future, the heavy investments have to be made now to wean ourselves away from the dependence and to build those internal capabilities. So going forward, what we'd like to see is for South Korea to maintain its place as one of those top players in smart technologies, communication technologies, is to build its own chips and not depend on Japan for those technologies.
All right, that was Dr. Graham Ong-Webb joining us on the phone today. Thank you so much for your insight today.
Thank you.